The Roots of Success podcast is for the landscape professional who's looking to up their game. We're not talking lawns or grass here. We're talking about people, process, and profits. The things deep within the business that need focus to scale a successful company. From hiring the right people and managing your team, to improving your operations and mastering your finances, we've got a brain trust of experts to help you nurture the roots of a successful business and grow to the next level. This is the Roots of Success.
Welcome to another episode of the Roots of Success podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Cole, and today we have Megan Parker and Tracy Wallingford, both certified Gallup Strengths coaches. Today we'll be talking all about Clifton Strengths assessments. From honing your leadership skills to building better team communication, the Clifton Strengths can help inform team values and visualize the relationships and responsibilities of your team members. To build a successful business, you have to know your strengths and how to lead with them. It's going to be a great episode. Let's dig into it. Megan, Tracy, you guys are professional business coaches. What is that? Like, what does that mean? Are you like a football coach, yell and scream, or consulting? Like, what is that? Help me out.
Sure. So I often say that I sort of vacillate between being a head coach and a head cheerleader. So sometimes I'm cheering you on, and sometimes I'm kicking you in the butt trying to hold you accountable. And really, both Megan and I are ICF certified coaches, which means we've had hundreds of hours of training and even more hundreds of hours of coaching experience. And we really partner with you to help you find the ways to be your best at work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of strengths. Megan, what else do you want to share with them about the coaching process?
You know, when I think about the difference between coaching and consulting, I think oftentimes when there's an issue or a problem that bubbles up, I think about coaches as asking deeper questions to help you uncover a solution that works for you, versus where if I'm in consulting mode, I'm potentially sharing my opinion, giving you advice, and I might sort of gently suggest that as a coach. But really what I want to do is help you ask the right questions to help you uncover what's going to work best for your business.
Yeah, you're peeling the onion back, right? As they say, in the layers of that to find the sort of the root cause of, you know, what's going on in their business or their leadership skills, right?
That's a great analogy, Tommy.
We've got some great things that you guys have been working on with the McFarland Stanford team and clients and a lot of your own clients, this thing called Gallup Strengths. Maybe a lot of us don't know that's listening what that is. A lot of the McFarland Stanford Grover clients know what that is now because they've talked about it and worked together. But I thought it was some sort of test because when I took it, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm a terrible test taker. It's probably going to evaluate me saying how bad I am. But fast forward, here we are. I actually love it. I think it's one of the greatest things ever. Megan, what is Gallup Strengths?
Yeah, so Gallup is the organization that facilitates an assessment called the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And Gallup, many of you have heard of, it's the same organization that you know and love that does a lot of the polling. The thing that Tracy and I love about Gallup is that there's so much research that goes behind it. So no matter what your personal opinion is of these personality assessments that, you know, you might take online and on Facebook or Instagram or something, there's a little bit more science behind it. In fact, there's decades of research that goes into it. And so what they have done is the founder of this assessment, Don Clifton, what they've done is they have identified behaviors and patterns that people naturally do in their day-to-day lives. And they've grouped those into 34 different talent themes. Okay. Those talent themes are measured scientifically through this assessment. And it is not a test. It's not pass or fail. So this is one test you can't fail, Tommy.
Woo, yeah.
There is literally no wrong answer.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the strengths philosophy essentially is one that values everybody's skills and contributions. So the beautiful thing about it is that the philosophy behind it is that everybody has talents to contribute to a team. And to be your best self at work, you just need to leverage those things that you naturally have talent for and invest in every day. And so one of the things that Tracy and I love about it is that our job as coaches is to help people uncover that, to really unlock their potential, and to, in a team setting, what that means is working better together.
Yeah. You know, what I always find myself, especially being in the landscape world and me being very critical, I'm always quick to point out weaknesses or things that are wrong, right? And I think that's just a natural thing that we all have. Tracy, that's not what Gallup Strengths Finder is, right? It's finding the weaknesses people. It's finding the strengths in them, as Tracy mentioned. What do you say about people that are sort of going, oh my gosh, that's all I do is point out weaknesses? How can something like this help them?
Well, if you think what's really powerful about Clifton Strengths, and that's really Don Clifton's philosophy when he started this back when, was, what if we stopped focusing on what's wrong with people and start focusing on what's right? So one of the ways I like to think about it is, if you're working on a scale from 0 to 100, right? So that's our scale, and you have 10 to invest. So think about it, $10, $10,000 for training, 10 hours, 10,000 hours if you're a Malcolm Gladwell fan and know that's what it takes to be an expert. So if you're investing 10, do you want to invest 10 in something that you're a 10 at or you're a 0 at to take you from 0 to 10 or 10 to 20? Or do you want to invest in some place that you're already naturally talented and strong and go from 80 to 90 or 90 to 100? Think about the impact to your organization. So this is really about, look, we need to understand where we don't naturally go, right? So I like to call them lesser talents versus weaknesses, but
Such a good way.
so I think of them as lesser talents, and what Clifton Strengths helps you uncover is, where do you most naturally go? What do you lead with? What are your natural places that you're going to, and ways you're going to approach the world? And we'll probably talk a little bit, because it's our favorite subject, about your lens on the world. And it's 34 talent themes that it's really ranking in order based on the answers you're giving to the assessment. And if you think about it, right, that gives you this really amazing, almost DNA-like picture of who you are and how you approach the world.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating.
I know where I'm leaning first. I look at those middle third. I have access to those, but that may not be where I naturally go. And I think of those lesser talents as where I'm really not going to go unless I'm forced, or I'm going to find another way around it. So where is the way I don't naturally approach the world? And what do I do to make up for that? Do I have a system? Do I have a buddy? What kind of ways? And that's really a lot of ways we help leaders, and we help teams think about how they use all of their talents and strengths.
Could you say, say I'm strength heavy in this sort of section over here, but yet maybe, a future business partner or a right-hand person, or you're coaching someone up to take the next level, to take your spot potentially. There's a sort of balance between those two. Is that something that you guys can kind of work with and see mostly?
That's really one of the powers of this assessment. And we've really seen this at work with our landscaping clients. So if you think about it, if the whole concept is you as an individual don't need to be well-rounded. So sit with that. This is a really different way of approaching the world. I have a teenager, we were looking, working on college applications. And I remember going through that process, that it was all about, are you well-rounded? And this is a really different philosophy. You listening to this podcast no longer have to be well-rounded. You don't have to be all. You actually want to lean into what you bring to the table, and then work with your teams to round you out. So you want to be well-rounded as a team, but you no longer have to think about being well-rounded as an individual.
Love it. So that's a great analogy. I think people strive to be good at a bunch of everything, right? I think early in my career, I was always trying to do it at all. Mm-hmm. And you're like, man, I'm also a kind of a perfectionist too. And then you get frustrated because you couldn't handle those things that are less strengths. Right, Tracy? And so that was a struggle for me for a long time, to where now you start to figure out. I'd say when I took the assessment a few years ago, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm significant and competitive. Okay, no shock. But now I start to know where my career is, where I'm very strong in, and working with people close to me where I can provide really good value. So yeah,
Well,
eye-open
think
experience.
think about you hosting this podcast, right?
Yeah.
I mean, significance means you like to work on things that have impact and
Yep.
importance. So
Yep.
this is it. And then competitive, you can actually look at your numbers and see how many
Yep.
people are listening, and does that go up? Right?
Yeah.
So this to me really speaks to your talents and strengths, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really the power of Clifton Strengths, is understanding what those are and then thinking about how you can naturally bring those to work. We want you to enjoy work. And, I always say, look, life's an 80-20 rule. There's going to be some things that you're not necessarily good at that you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Mine's expense reports and billing. Not good at it. Not my strength. That is literally down, the bottom of my lesser talents is consistent. That's not my gift. I partner with people who are better at that and bring more of that and are better at that tracking. Discipline is also in my bottom. So that's really what this is about. And I think Megan can probably tell you that she helps me on the discipline side.
So I know where you're going with this, Tracy. I know, because I know you guys are have a great dynamic boldness to both of you, work well really together. Megan, explain why you guys work well together. Because Tracy's strengths, but your strengths, and oftentimes those two form together a really good dynamic team.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there's an activity that we do that illustrates this pretty well, but essentially what it boils down to is, all of our 34 talent themes sort of roll up into one of 4 different domains. So they're all of them sort of roll up, and we all have a natural propensity towards one of those specific domains. Mine tends to be an executing domain. So I like to get things done, check things off the list, schedule, bill, like all of those task-oriented things. That makes me feel good about checking those things off the list.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, and that's why Tracy talked about how we're a good partner to each other. Now, on the other hand, things that I don't really enjoy doing, Tracy happens to be fantastic at, right? So she's a great relationship builder. People naturally love her and enjoy talking with her and working with her. She's a great strategically minded person. So she leads with strategic thinking. And that is really helpful when we think about the long term, the future game plan. So when we're making plans down the road, I tend to live in the moment, right? And Tracy tends to do more of that strategic thinking.
Yeah, it's such a great, it's almost like, a business partner, what I was saying earlier, or your right-hand person to balance each other out. And when you have those aligned, the amount that you guys could accomplish is a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Which is great. As I'm sitting here with on my desk, my little tent card here that's always here, and I always look at it, and my top 5 are this: significance, competition, focus, consistency, and futuristic. So I'm like a little more of like a Megan Parker, where it's like we're just knocking stuff off the list and executing and thinking the future a little bit. But anyways, I love that. Tracy or Megan, how does just a manager, how does a leadman in the field, how does an account manager or project manager, anything in that landscape field, are they able to use something like this with their team? And maybe that manager has unlocked the 34 and studied it, but yet maybe their direct report doesn't know anything about that, right? So paint that perspective, as our audience are predominantly, in the landscape field, how that would work.
One of the sort of aha moments or takeaways that we like to share with people is your 34 report is essentially the lens that you see the world with. So the lens that you see the world with is really based on your talent themes. And understanding that everyone else has a different sort of DNA report, a different lens on the world that they're looking through, all of a sudden that does so much for you and your relationship. It helps you understand where they're coming from, the lens that they're looking through, and it helps them understand the lens that you're looking through. And if you can align to a common goal and each look through your own lenses, you can make so much more progress. So that for a manager, that starts with sharing your report. What does your lens look like? What things are important to you? What values? What do you value in the workplace? I have high responsibility. Tracy and I share this theme. I value when someone tells me they're going to do something, or when I ask for their help on something and they say yes, they commit to that. I want to know that it's going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Because that's how I would respond in that situation. If someone's leaning on me for something, I'm not going to let that person down. And I value that in other people. And the flip side of that is that if someone breaks that trust and they don't follow through, it's really difficult to earn that trust back in that relationship. And so knowing that is important to me. The power in someone who I'm working with, if they understand how important that is to me, then we're on the same page with expectations. So another little nugget that I like to talk about is conflict is the result of unmet expectations. Conflict is the result of unmet expectations. And so when you think about it, right, whenever there's a rub, it's generally because I expected one thing and you delivered something different. Mm-hmm. Now, the question I would ask you as a coach is, were you both clear on those expectations?
Right. Up front.
Yeah. And so if someone knows the lens that you're looking through, then they will understand your expectations as a result.
Yeah. I've seen there's a handful of companies that you guys have worked with where they'll put these top 5 or 10, in front of their door or office or their desk, and the entire team sees it. And now there's a sense of, oh, I see Tracy's lens, right? So now, but my lens is this. And having that out and open in front of everyone to see just sort of understands their lenses and your lens. And so oftentimes, I'm pretty bad at this. I always thought like, it should just be the Tommy way. Like, just get it done. Like, what's the holdup, right? We need more like me because I just want to execute and get things done. But like, that's not the Tracy lens. So if I keep attacking her, right, going, get this done, let's go, like, what's the holdup? And she's going like, it's just frustrating. And then what happens if Tracy's my direct report, right? Tracy's going to be like, whoa, this is not working out, like potentially causing conflict, potentially I'm out the door because I can't deal with Tommy at all, right? You see that a lot in businesses?
Oh, yeah, we see it. We see it a lot with activators and strategic thinkers. So think about your business and think about a meeting, for example. So you go into a meeting as the owner and the leader, and you have this new idea and you are ready to go. And we see this a lot with our activators. And, another key message here is that there's no right or wrong set of talents for any particular role. We love when we get our peer groups together and map out all of our CEOs and our founders and our leaders' talent themes. They're all different. They're all different. They're all different. They are all sorts of combinations of the 34. They have different things they lead with. There are certainly some things that we see more often. So, for example, of all the 30 million people who've taken this assessment, we tend to find that CEOs and leaders influencing skills tend to be more prevalent in that population, even though they're less prevalent in the population overall, for example.
Interesting.
So you see some of those go, big ideas, those kind of things. So imagine, go back to our meeting, you're walking into your meeting, you have this new idea, you are ready to go, like, okay, we are going to start this whole new division. We're going to do Christmas decor. We're really kind of quiet at Christmas. We want to employ our people more. So all this good thinking. And he says, all right, everybody, let's sign up. And imagine you have, could be anybody on your team, but let's say the finance person, right? Who is a strategic thinker and doesn't go, who wants time to process, who wants to think about the future, who wants to think about what's the investment necessary, what does that mean? What does that mean for our hiring? So wants to really think through that and is literally staring at you stony-faced in the meeting, right? Because they can't process in the moment. And you as leader like, all right, come on, is everybody on board? Let's get an agreement here. So think about how powerful that is to know that. If you know your leadership team and know that you've got a couple people who lead with strategic thinking, you might know that you want to brief that they're not going to make a decision in a meeting and they're not going to be supportive. And they might be, to your point, Tommy, in the beginning, your naysayer who points out the 16 things that are wrong, because that's their natural reaction is I can't process this now. All I can see are potential pitfalls because I'm a strategic thinker. So we help teams mitigate those sort of situations. What could you do in that situation?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you the answer because we're on the podcast, but in a coaching session, we would actually ask you that question. Well, what could you do? Okay. So you're frustrated. She's looking at you stony faced, or he's looking at you stony faced. What could you do? And they might come up with ideas. Well, could I brief them before? Could I actually send them an email the night before? Could I tell them before the meeting, right? But there's really power in knowing that it's not you, it's not a personality conflict, it's not that someone's a downer, it's that they may just have a different lens on the world and how they approach thinking about something that doesn't allow them to jump on board with you in the moment. And honestly, as a leader, think about that. You want that. You want, right? You want that person who's partnering with you to say, okay, well, had you thought about this? Or, a lot of our crew takes off to go see their families in December, and, that could be really difficult. And do we really want to hire a temporary crew? I mean, all those kind of things you could think about.
Yeah, makes sense. And I would assume that a very good leader would know all those strengths of their team because they need to be approached differently, right? So the finance guy may need a little prep talk, or he may need to research it a little bit, or he may, right? Or versus the other ones are like, let's go, man, I'm on board. Someone else may need a different lens to see that and how they're approached. And if that leader understands their, let's say, 5 direct reports or management team, and he approaches them a little bit differently based on strengths, I mean, oh my God, that's like an amazing leadership and company like that you want to be a part of, right?
Absolutely. In fact, Tracy and I, one of the teams we worked with really closely, the entire team had their primary domain led with strategic thinking skills, and their leader, who was the VP of their division, led with relationship building themes. And so, at an offsite that we were facilitating for them, the vision for that offsite was very different. Right. So one person has the vision of this is going to be a great time to bond and get to know each other and really understand each other. And the rest of the team is thinking, we have a goal that we need to meet, a revenue goal, and you're our leader and we need to know what the strategy is. Yeah. And those are 2 very different goals. And there is a way that both of those goals can be met. And one of the things that we talked about, luckily this leader is smart enough to realize that if you don't lead with strategic thinking skills, like they might need to enlist some help with that strategy, right? And that's where Tracy and I came in. Now, the sort of aha moment for that leader was, this is an actual foundational need that my team has. It is really hard for my team to go out and do their job every single day when they don't see a long-term strategy that they're striving for. They need to have clearly defined goals and a plan to help achieve those goals in order for them to do their best work. And when they don't see that in their leader, then it's very difficult for them to get on board, and vice versa for their leader, right? So that was one team that Tracy and I were able to go in, help them map out that strategy, but also get some one-on-one relationship building time with them, with each person as well. So that worked out really well for them.
God, vision, man, vision. That's why we coach to, right? The mission, vision, core values that stay in your office. It's practiced within your organization, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, so that those leaders and people in onboarding new team members understand that sort of long-term deal, because people get caught up in the day-to-day of everything.
Yeah.
That's great.
If you think about it, this strengths concept really ties into that mission, vision, and values, right? We're all working toward this goals. We can all work towards the same goal, but bring our individual talents and strengths and lenses to the world. We had a really great example with another landscaping group we were working with, where if you remember a couple of years ago, kind of you know in the COVID era, you all were going gangbusters and hiring was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And we actually helped this team really creatively attack that problem, right? Everyone was dealing with it. So we looked at the direct report team that reported to the leader, and we realized that 2 of the direct reports led with relationship building themes. And 2 of the direct reports led with strategic thinking. Now think about the power of knowing that. You could actually create partnerships to go come up with ideas to problems in all sorts of ways. We can create teams that are actually super balanced. In this case, we put the relationship buildings together in one room. We put, well, it was COVID, so it was Zoom, but we put the relationship builders together in one virtual room, and we put the strategic thinkers together in another virtual room. And it was amazing to see. And we said, okay, the challenge is hiring. You all have sold more business, yay you, than you know what to do with. How are you going to go find people to do the work? And it was fascinating to see how it came back to us.
Wow.
Because our strategic thinkers came up with really long-term, I mean, one of their ideas was, well, we're just going to go acquire another landscape company. So like an acquisition strategy, really thinking through kind of that piece. And then our relationship builders were, hey, we know a lot of our crews go to the same church. We could set up a table outside of that church and hand out, I don't know, breakfast tacos after church and talk to people and have our team who goes to church there saying what a great place we are to work for. And so think about that and the power of that, and having this really diverse set of ideas to come to the table. And that's where you really see this in action. And what was great was they were able to actually implement both, right? Yeah. So by knowing that, we actually got, and those people, by putting them together like that, right? The relationship builders fed off of each other. The strategic thinkers fed off of each other, but it could have just as easily come up with a whole different set of ideas had we put them together. There's just real power in knowing and understanding. And I wanted to address a question you asked earlier, which is, what do you do? Megan and I walk around and ask people what their strengths are, but obviously 30 million people have taken this. Not everyone has. So there are some clues. We do a really fun exercise in our group workshops, where we say, raise your hand. So, raise your hand if you have a neat and organized closet. And I do not raise my hand. Megan does. Raise your hand. So think about you're out driving with your crew heading to a job. Does your driver, is he like looking at the person on, next to him on the road and like revving his engine and like trying to be the first one to take off from the red light? Maybe that's someone with competition. Yeah. So you can also kind of, if you know the themes and understand the concepts, you can watch out for tells that give you an ideas. Now we're always going to say invest and, give the Clifton Strengths assessment and really lean into it, but there are some clues for new folks that you might be able to pick up on. Yeah,
that's it. Once again, this is just fascinating to sit here and listen what everyone's strengths is. I wish everyone had it. Do you find yourself like walking around or like at the grocery store or having conversations with your friends over happy hour going, wow, this person is this? I had a conversation the other day and we were at baseball practice and they're putting in a new sports field and where my son plays and it's turf on the infield, but grass in the outfield. And I literally had a conversation yesterday and I'm like, okay, that's cool. But there's one big issue. And I'm sitting here analyzing that grass that's supposed to be going in. And I'm like, it looks absolutely terrible. And it kills me because I'm that guy that goes, I'm criticizing the landscape, right? Because that's just what I do. I drive around and I'm like, oh, that makes me sick, or that looks beautiful, or whatever. And then I'm talking to this lady and she goes, yeah, that's your industry. And the lady that I was talking to goes, yeah, I'm in the men's apparel business where I, provide them combinations of shirts and shorts and business attire. And so she walks around, she goes, "Oh, that guy has bad taste." Like, which is kind of funny because I feel like Tracy and Megan walk around or be in a conversation and go, "Man, their strength is this. Like, it is dominating." And that's to me is fascinating a little bit because like how I am with landscape and construction. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah, I would say that's true. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes and I think Tracy and I are trained in this, right? So we are certified. And so some of it is we've trained our brains to think that way to some extent. But yeah, I think that some people's talents are naturally obvious and there are lots of ways to be successful. But yes, we do see that.
That's funny. That's good stuff.
Well,
Tracy or Megan, coaching that you guys are doing these days, we're kind of in a somewhat awkward economy, recession, maybe not recession, whatever. What's some of the things some pain points that clients are discussing with you that you guys are working through, as a business owner, as a manager? What's out there that you could provide our audience going, "Oh man, that's quite interesting"?
Well, we touched on hiring, and I think that's always a challenge. And our leaders often ask us, is this a hiring assessment? And it indeed is not, right? As we talked about, there's no right set of talents or strengths for any specific job. It's, can you lean into your talents and strengths to do your job well? And are you surrounded by people? And certainly we do see that you can shift duties. For example, we had a client we worked through. We did the strengths assessment. We asked some questions about their job and what they did. And one of the cool things that we can do is once we work with a team, as they onboard new members, they'll have them do the assessment and then do a debrief with us. And it was interesting because we worked with one team where they literally had assigned the social media to the office manager because and it was literally just, well, she's sitting here at a computer, so she can do that. This was not her talent or her gift. She really was struggling. So all of the hallmarks of being able to lean into your talents and strengths, ease, enjoyment at work, and excellence, she had none of them. She was not a relationship builder. She was not the one. She was doing the spreadsheets. She was making sure the office supplies were ordered. She was making sure people were paid. All super important. She was not the person who interacted with the crews to kind of find out, right, who was going on. Are you sending me, sending in snaps from the field? And we were able to identify that and help them get the right person. And we, hear the concept of, do you have the right people in the right seats?
Yeah.
And I think that's so key, especially as we start to go into what seems a bit shaky as far as, what does the world look like? What are our sales going to look like? Having people in the right seats and feeling good that people can be really productive is super important. The last thing you want to feel like as a leader is, wow, I'm not sure that I'm getting the best out of any employee.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit something very good there. If you've got an employee, Bob, we'll take Bob for instance, and you start assigning things to Bob because Bob's right there. Like, why? And not knowing Bob's strengths, you're sort of burying Bob, whether he can do it or not. And you're like, oh, Bob's just not the right person. I mean, come on, Bob. Like, you just can't figure it out. If I had a business, right, I would get the strengths like step one. I would want to know all of this information, and people, you mentioned something, is it a hiring tool? No, it's not. You got to hire based on, a lot of, culture, and there's a lot of other things, but there's always a person in your organization that can do well. You just got to align their strengths with the job description, and the responsibilities have to tie together. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Megan.
Well, I was just going to say, and if you're missing that, then you need to figure out who in your organization can you partner with, right? So the leader that I spoke about earlier who didn't have strategy, although he was a VP of a department, I mean, is that a needed area of expertise for him? Absolutely. does that mean that he shouldn't be in that role? No, not at all. So, but knowing your strengths and also the areas where you don't naturally go, then you need to know who to partner with. I would argue that relationship building is probably one of the most important things you need as in a sales role, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he has that, but in order to be an effective leader, he also needed to have the strategy and the ability to think long term for that. And so he just needed a good partner for that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's, like Tracy said earlier, there's not necessarily one magic set of strengths. If you look at some of the leaders, their profiles are readily available on the Gallup website. But if you look at strong leaders throughout, time, they all have a different profile and they're all exceptional leaders. And so I think part of the danger in subscribing to one specific type of leader, there might be somebody that you really admire, but trying to emulate that person's style might not necessarily be possible, right? So the thing I love about strengths is that it shows you your authentic profile and allows you to be you. There might be somebody that you admire. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same sort of profile as that person. And you can admire somebody because they do something that maybe you're not so good at, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it makes sense. So if I'm a client of you guys and we've done the assessment and we've got all these cool little cards here that's got our strengths and you unlock these 34 strengths, like what happens after that? Like what's the next step that I would guess you guys come in and sort of coach them on scenarios? I think Megan, you brought up a really good point with the VP of a department. Do they have to, oftentimes business owners go, well, you're just not the right person, right? And you move on. I mean, I bet everyone that's listening as a business owner has probably fired people that probably shouldn't have because they're just in the wrong seat. So what happens after all this assessment is done and you're working? Are you trying to help them make those decisions, or they, encourage and ask a lot of questions to say, who's your match, who's your partner, like who's your buddy? Like there could be someone in the field, like a crew of 4 guys. And if you knew their strengths working together, they could buddy up with someone else in the field to sort of help that out on a different scale. Right. So what's your next step after all of this is figured out?
It's a good question. So, I mean, I think, step 1 is taking the assessment. I think, step 2, which I think is step 1 only is helpful if you have step 2, right? So step 2 is really understanding the assessment, debriefing that together, working through a process. Tracy and I have a process that we take teams through. Individual coaching can also be transformational. So you might just have, maybe your whole team you don't necessarily want it for your whole team, but you want it for an individual. Maybe they're struggling with confidence. Maybe they're struggling in their role and they're trying to figure out what aligns and what doesn't. I personally went through that journey where I just felt like, I was good at my job, but I wasn't necessarily, it wasn't aligned to the things that provided me ease, excellence, and enjoyment. And so I had to make a shift. And we helped another company where, and the best case scenario is that that person intrinsically knows that this might not necessarily be a good fit for them. They just need help seeing what is it that aligns well for me? What are the areas that aren't aligning and how can I maybe partner, or is there a different role I need to be in? And sometimes that is the case, but the best case scenario is that person realizes it for themselves. And that's never a goal that we're striving for, right? Like we don't go into a coaching engagement hoping that this person just has this epiphany. Yeah. But what we're hoping is that the person is able to we will help them be strategic about what fits, what doesn't fit, and how can we help you partner more effectively for the betterment of the organization.
That exactly. And I think Megan touched on a really important point that step 1 isn't really helpful without step 2. So right. The amazing thing about Gallup is you can take, once you take your assessment and we help companies and get the codes and help facilitate that, there's tons of information that you get directly from Gallup about you. The challenge is you now have that about you. And what do you do with it? And that's really what the step 2 facilitation. And then it's sharing it. Because what you realize is that, I really understand my top 5 really well. I know, exactly what learner means. It means I ask a lot of questions. It also can mean for someone who doesn't see the world from a learner lens that they think I'm second guessing them or I don't believe them.
Micromanage. Yep.
Like micromanage. And I saw that in my career that, because I lead with learner and responsibility, I'm really expecting you to get something done. And if you're not keeping me apprised that it's done, that it's getting done, you don't give me milestones, then I'm going to ask you a lot of questions and sound like a micromanager. Now, think about someone who those are their bottom talents. They're not curious at all. They're just going to think, like, hey, I'm just doing my job, go away. Really can be a lot of conflict. So there's real power in then coming together, and we really work to help people understand what these lenses mean. That again, it's not you, it's actually me. This is how I approach the world. So to work with me as a leader or a colleague with learner and responsibility, you probably need to update me along the way. It doesn't need to be a fancy status report spreadsheet. You just need to tell me, hey, I'm on it, or hey, I'll have an answer for you, or whatever that might be. And think about how powerful it is for the team if you can set up some of those ground rules early because you understand how people work.
Yeah, huge. I love it. That's great.
That's powerful. And then we've gone back. We've actually worked with several companies now for years where we go back and we do dig deeper. So we dig deeper into how does this, for a management team, what is strengths? How do they affect your management lens on the world? We just did an amazing session with a team called Powerful Partnerships, because as you know, some of our landscapers are set up where they have kind of people selling and then people leading do. So the production teams, and sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect in what's
a lot of times there is, Tracy. Yeah.
And what happens, right? So we're doing some powerful partnership sessions based on, they already know each other's strengths, but they're not thinking on how to use them and how to think about what they might need to do on that communication, for example. So we have been working, this is a living, breathing thing. A one-time assessment is helpful perhaps to an individual to know yourself a little bit better, but it's really living it as part of the mission, vision, and values that we at McFarland think is so important that makes the difference.
I love that part. It's like landscape, right? You can install the landscape day one, but if you just walk away, it's going to turn bad. You know that. You've seen the landscape. You guys have landscape of your house, all that, and it requires maintenance, right? It requires the seasonal changes, the constant adjustments, the attitudes the landscape gives you, the weather pattern, like. It's no different than the strengths. You take the test or assessment and you learn and you're like, okay, cool, sounds good. And you walk away. Well, there's a whole maintenance period involved to keep you on the path of learning those and becoming a great leader. As we start to close things up on this discussion, one of the things I sort of got from both of you, and I'll give you a chance to both speak. But what I got out was this concept of you've got this talent, you think it, feel it, whatever you got, this Tommy talent. And then you take that and you invest time. That's your maintenance, right? You practice it, you develop it, you understand it extremely well. And then the equal side of that is what the strength is, right? And the consistency of the strength, right? And now I've developed that over the course of learning what you guys, teach me. But that's the value here that I wanted to stress is it's not a one and done deal. It's that times that equals the strength. Any sort of feedback or last nugget as we sort of put a bow on this thing? And what it means to you and your clients?
Well, I want to clarify that it's talent times investment equals strength. And so you get an A+, Tommy, for, taking that. from the session. So
I'm slightly competitive, so you're going to have to put that in my little my report card.
I'm giving you the gold star. So talent, that's exactly right. Talent times investment equals strength. So what the assessment is measuring is your natural talents, your natural way you approach the world, the gifts that you were given, and investing in those talents versus trying to fix something that's a lesser talent. Investing in your talents is what's going to allow you to bring their best to work and bring the best to the world.
Love it. Great stuff. Megan, any final thoughts?
Well, in true coaching fashion, Tommy, I'm going to turn this question over to you. So you've been through this process, with the McFarland Stanford team. What has been the impact on you that you've seen and on the team?
The impact it's a twofold deal. The impact that I have is knowing what I am, like self-aware of what my strengths are. And so that I don't get frustrated or bogged down on my perfectionism on other things that I have a less strength of. It's been an eye-opening experience for me personally, more than anything else. And then when my wife took it in Italy, I'm like, oh, wow. Like I totally understand this now. And we have differences, but we're a team, which is great. But it's also been great to see all the clients take the assessment and see where they're coming from, because I'm the driver, get it done, shut up. Okay, relationships to the side, and I'm like, I'll give them a grade of A or F where they did that or not. And that's not fair. And so it's an eye-opening experience.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned family, because we can do a whole nother session on this. The impact, this is not just a workplace tool, and the impact, especially we see this with some of our husband and wife team owners, right?
Yeah, very
power in understanding that. And when we do that session, we'll talk teenagers too.
Nice. Well, Megan and Tracy, I feel like now I can run through a brick wall, because I've talked to two professional leadership coaches and Gallup professionals, because both of you are very motivating, and it's been a pleasure working with you so far and for more years to come. But I'm super glad to have you both on our podcast, and hope you've enjoyed it. And we're going to have to do this again. We'll have to do a more deep dive on the next one. So.
Well, that's our favorite thing to do. Thank you, Tommy. We love being part of Roots of Success.
Ready to take the next step? Download our free profitability scorecard to quickly create your own baseline financial assessment and uncover the fastest ways to improve your business. Just go to mcfarlandstanford.com/scorecard to get yours today. To learn more about McFarland Stanford, our best-in-class peer groups, and other services, go to our website at mcfarlandstanford.com, and don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time on The Roots of Success.